Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 119 of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. Today I got Christina D'Arcangelo on. She's the CEO of Affinity Biopartners, which is a CRO arm of a CBD biotech, Affinity Bioceuticals. Did I get that right, Christina?
Well, they're actually separate organizations. So Affinity Biopartners is a clinical research organization that's freestanding that supports clinical trials relational to medical cannabis and CBD,
Okay.
which will help Affinity Bioceuticals, which is the biotech company.
And for those who don't know, CBD is cannabidiol. Am I pronouncing that correct?
Yes.
And it's been really, I mean, I live in California, so there's a CBD clinic on every street corner. I'm actually thinking of getting my mom on it because she's battling depression her entire life, off and on. Her doctor recommended we try it, so I'm just myself starting to get familiar with CBD, and from a layman's perspective, CBD is essentially one of the therapeutic compounds within cannabis that does not have any that does not cause any of the typical or associated symptoms of marijuana. It's just the medical part of it, and that's what is referred to as CBD. Am I right, Christina?
Well, it depends because there is some CBD because everything is derived from the cannabis plant, right? And there is some CBD which does have THC in it. There are some products that have hardly any, if any at all. So it depends. So you really have to pay attention when you're purchasing the CBD to read the fine print to understand whether or not there is THC contained. Because if there is THC contained, depending upon the level, then you are getting the effects, if you will, that are more similar to actually taking medical cannabis.
I gotcha. So it's not quite as black and white as I presented it
Right.
in the intro. Okay, good. See, that's why we need you on, Christina. So here's my question, and I'm involved in the clinical research space. When I typed in on clinicaltrials.gov CBD, I'm seeing only academic studies. I'm not seeing any industry sponsored trials. As a matter of fact, Affinity Bioceuticals is really the only biotech or any sponsor that I know of that does this private industry sponsored trials. And I know about you guys through Instagram. So why is it that, well, first of all, why is that the case? Why is more research not being done on this?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, what's the benefits of doing the research if CBD is legal, I want to say, in most states, or it's becoming
Well,
legal?
well, here's the thing with CBD is that it's still considered a Schedule One.
Hmm.
Jeff Sessions would consider CBD a Schedule One. So that means that if you have it in a state that medical cannabis is not legal in, you could suffer the consequences, from a police standpoint, right? So there are companies that, like I believe GW Pharmaceuticals, they're doing some CBD studies. There's another company, C3 Global Biosciences, that will be doing clinical trials in the U.S. soon with CBD. So there's more companies that are coming on board trying to do CBD studies. But the problem is, think about it from a recruitment strategy as it relates to patients. It's very hard to be able to recruit these studies under the way that the federal guidelines are right now. So we can't operate like we would in a traditional biotech setting, because of the way that CBD is viewed, since it is a Schedule One.
Mm-hmm. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but is CBD something that could be patentable? Is that why,
Yeah.
or cannot be, or it
No, it
can?
could be.
Okay.
Absolutely. The derivatives of basically the developers of the actual CBD, and those derivatives that they've used, the strands, etc., can be patentable. So there's definitely a way to, proceed forward. And GW has filed an IND with the FDA, and I know that some of the other biotechs out there that are looking to get into this will be also filing INDs with the FDA to run a clinical trial just like you would in normal industry.
Interesting. So, is there opportunity for numerous different sponsors to patent a different type of CBD depending on the therapeutic indication?
It's a therapeutic indication as well as how they're making the actual product itself.
And the formulary, right? Like,
Correct.
okay, I gotcha. Okay, because I always thought of these kind of things like similar to stem cells, where you can't really patent it, and or like supplements, which is why no one wants to invest in the clinical research process because there's no point in getting it patented. But
Yeah.
this clears that up for me. So it makes sense. I
Yeah.
mean, why aren't we seeing many more doing this? Is it just because of the whole Schedule One designation and why that makes it difficult to pull off some studies?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the Schedule One parameters. The other thing is funding. A lot of people are nervous still, because we're obviously talking to private investors for our biotech company. And people are nervous to invest in this because they're afraid of the ramifications as it relates to the federal way of, doing things from, the government's perspective. So the reversal of the Cole memo, for those that don't understand what the Cole memo represents, with putting everything back into the federal government's hands as it relates to medical cannabis, scared a lot of people. But if you think about it in the long run, do you think that these federal enforcers, DEA agents, etc., are going to actually push this envelope for the states where it's legal, from a state level as it relates to medical cannabis? I mean, there's, you're in the hotspot of it in California where it's recreationally approved
Mm-hmm.
as well as medicinal. I mean, medicinal cannabis was approved back in 1996, correct me if I'm wrong, in California. So they've been operating, under the confounds of the medical system, if you will, as it relates to cannabis for a number of years. And you don't see any crazy things going on in California as a result of medical cannabis
Mm-hmm.
or CBD for that matter.
Right. Yeah. As a matter of fact, quite the opposite. As it is becoming more mainstream, you're seeing more people switching from traditional pharmaceuticals to CBD and other alternative forms of treatment. So definitely interesting to keep a finger on the pulse of this industry, and we're going to get back to this, but I wanted to backtrack a little
Mm-hmm.
and get some more info on you.
Okay.
How did you get started in research? What was your background growing up, and what made you get into CBD research of all things?
Right. So yeah, it is kind of funny because funny, like wow, ironic. Um, so I grew up in a very traditional family environment. My dad was a blue collar worker. He was president of Phoenix Steel, which was a local steel company here in Phoenixville, PA. He was president of the local steelworkers union and then a laborer. And then after three bankruptcies, the steel mill finally closed its doors. And after that, he got a job on the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission, and he became a Teamster. And he ended up being a shop steward and negotiating grievances and healthcare contracts on behalf of the Teamsters and its members against the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission. So I grew up in a very labor-oriented political family, blue collar family, very hardworking. So that was the premise of my foundation. So I think that that's probably why I work as hard as I do,
Mm-hmm.
because I had a very good example early on with my father. Um, my first job I got in the industry was back in the late 90s. I know this is now dating me, but I was working for a law firm at the time, and they had a CRO in the same building as the satellite office for the law firm.
Okay.
And one of my colleagues left and went to go work for the CRO and said, Christina, you should come down and interview. We have a job opening for someone to negotiate contracts. So I didn't know anything about the industry. I didn't understand what a CRO meant. I knew about pharma and things of that nature, but I didn't really understand the industry very well.
And by the
And
way, we still don't really know what a CRO means. They're constantly merging and evolving.
right,
Yeah, so not much has changed since '99, but yet quite a lot has as well.
right. So someone basically took a chance on me at this little CRO called Covalent Group at the time, and they brought me into their finance group, and I started working on investigator contracts and budget negotiations, some of their MSAs, master services agreements with their sponsor companies. So I worked on Lipitor back then, the special blue pill with Pfizer, a lot of different
Mm-hmm.
things back then. And so I built a nice foundation there and left the CRO to go work for Johnson and Johnson Centocor. And at that time, those were the heydays of Remicade. And so I worked on all of the Remicade clinical trials, working with all the various clinical trial sites all over the world. I was globally negotiating site contracts and budgets, and then started to outsource myself, as a lot of times happens in big pharma and biotech. They find that it makes sense to, given the arena as far as how drugs fail, sometimes it makes sense to just outsource a function rather than fully staff up. So I started outsourcing myself to some of the larger CROs and then managing that outsourced relationship, and realized at that point that I wanted to learn more about the outsourcing side of things, and I actually wanted to understand the CRO perspective. So I left J&J and took a job down in Wilmington, North Carolina, to work for headquarters at PPD and their proposals group, where I started working on their MSAs and work orders for basically large pharma on the East Coast. But then I also took all the West Coast biotech companies, and then all of the Asian clients were assigned to me because I was working with Centocor Japan. So I understood the Asian culture and how to work and with respect to business dealings. And once I felt like I had learned a fair amount as to how the CRO life works and, how things are kind of played out from a management perspective and budget things, I left and I moved to the West Coast. So I moved out to the San Francisco area and went to work for my first West Coast biotech company, PDL Biopharma, which was eventually bought out by Abbott. And that's when I started really doing outsourcing and procurement activities,
Mm-hmm.
and was very fortunate that I started building up, my toolbox peripherally, if you will, and had other opportunities presented to me, at the Bay Area, especially at that time of the industry, was very much like lily pads. You could go from one biotech to the next, to the next, to the next, because it was so prevalent.
Yeah.
And
And
it
it's
was
still
awesome.
kind of like that now. I mean,
Yeah, it's gotten
we're
better. Yes.
yeah, we're like in a bit of a biotech bubble, I would argue. But yeah, definitely interesting to see the supply of clinical research. I mean, this is 2018 is supposed to be a record year for the industry as far as
Yeah.
the number of trials out there, right?
Yeah. I would agree with that. There's a lot of very innovative science going on, especially from a biotech standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that I love to see. One of the things that, my company chooses to ensure that we do is that we work with clients that serve unmet medical needs. That's our passion. That's why we're here. Many of my key personnel on my biopartners team have had various things occur, either with themselves or with family members. And a lot of times it was unmet medical needs. I mean, myself, my father passed away at 62 in 2015 from stage 4 liver, lung, and stomach cancers, which was a complete devastation for me personally, because he was my number one guy. And, to see someone die right before your eyes, it's not that old, is not an easy feat. And I felt like although my career has afforded me financial gains, right? You get paid to do your job. I felt like all of the work that I've done over the years from an oncology standpoint, working on many oncology studies, proved to be very beneficial and helpful, because I was able to adequately be his advocate, be his voice, and make sure he had the best care possible for all the different types of cancers that he had.
Yeah, so it's that personal, I guess, relationship to the actual unmet medical needs that I guess motivated you to get involved in this space, right?
Yes. So basically, we were participating. I have a nonprofit called Affinity Patient Advocacy, and we work across the country to help patients who need advocate help and their families. And our services range from various things, depending upon what it is that the patient requires. And we do that at no charge. So we were at a local Relay for Life function, and I was requested to speak as one of their keynotes because I was a caregiver to my father, and they wanted me to kind of talk about the challenges of that, but also the fact that I have the clinical research background. I kind of bring a different perspective, I think,
of course,
to the table, and I'm so thankful, for that. So I was able to speak, and I really enjoyed doing that and speaking from the heart, and talking about how I felt. And I got a little bit choked up. I'm a pretty tough person, I negotiate deals, and I do what I need to do. But when it comes to this aspect of me, this is like, the heartstrings part of me and who I am,
Mm-hmm.
And one of our sponsors, luckily, was a dispensary out west on the West Coast, and the dispensary later contacted me directly because one of my friends was interested in buying into the franchise. So she, was able to get this the sponsorship. And so they wanted to talk to me because they figured out that I was a clinical research person, which is, no big deal. I always make sure I tell people that, and it's in my bio if you go on Affinity Patient Advocacy's website, because I want people to understand that, I am a qualified person to be doing what I'm doing as a CEO and president of the board for this nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm proud of what I've accomplished in my clinical research career too. And so we started having a discussion with the dispensary, and they were interested in potentially running clinical trials out there with their grow. And so that's kind of where it all kind of unraveled.
Interesting. So it sort of happened pretty organically. I mean, you weren't actively seeking these kind of opportunities. They just kind of one opportunity turned into another, and pretty soon you've got a whole network and a full seems like a full service for all stakeholders involved in the healthcare, really. I mean, so what do you guys, as far as the CRO, are you doing studies that are non-CBD?
Oh yeah, we work in the traditional setting.
Okay.
That's what I call traditional, just for everybody that's listening, so they understand the difference. Because I know you and I get it because we work in this industry, but there will be people that will listen today that do not work in this industry. So I'm always very aware of that. So what I mean by traditional, I mean, biologics and devices that biotech, med device companies and pharma companies are running. So, our sweet spot with respect to clients that we typically work with are the small to mid-sized biotechs
Mm-hmm.
because we're nimble. We're in some cases larger than they are, um, and we're able to make sure that we're cost conscious. We always keep that in the back of our minds, and the majority of my team has worked for the sponsors in past lives, so we think like a sponsor. We're able to mitigate, and a lot of times we're hired to rescue studies that are unsuccessful as it relates to oncology. And
Yeah, I saw that.
yeah,
So is it mostly oncology that you're doing? And what?
no, we do various things.
Okay.
I have to tell you though, we specifically seek uh, the clients that we seek are those that are working in the acute care space. So if it's a pain client, if it's a rare disease like orphan drug status or
Mm-hmm.
oncology, I'd like to see more with DIPG research, for children, especially since today is International Childhood Cancer Day.
Mm-hmm.
So many kids, there's 43, I believe, 43 kids a day that are diagnosed with childhood cancer, and most of
Wow.
them are the age of 6. I'm picking on DIPG because that's the cancer that, for the non-cancer aware individuals, because there's a lot of them out there, and I didn't know this until, obviously I got in this industry, but it's the cancer that's on the child's brainstem. And a lot of times when they figure out that the poor child has DIPG, it's late stage. So what we mean by
Mm.
late stage is, they have 6 months left to live. They're stage 4. And this is debilitating. DIPG is a cancer where you'll have this young, vibrant child that by the end of their lifetime, they do not look like themselves anymore. They cannot sometimes walk, talk, breathe on their own. It's really a shame, and I'm hoping that some of this medical cannabis research that some of the colleagues out in Australia and Israel, and even when we finally get fully suited in the U.S., that someone starts working on, because there's a definite need. I mean, I'm aware of a company in Australia that's going to be working on. They're in preclinical for brain cancer. And so we've been talking to them from a CRO perspective. And I'd like to see them do some DIPG clinical research, because it's definitely an orphan
Mm-hmm.
indication. And these poor kids are really an unmet medical need.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that going on across different therapeutic indications for sure. With all the studies we just got finished saying, there's so many studies out there this year. We still need more. It's still not enough, right? Like, you constantly need more, and that's before we even get into CBD and stem cells and all the latest.
Progressive, yeah.
All the more progressive treatment alternatives. So as we wrap up, I guess with CBD, what kind of therapeutic indications are you focused on there with the biotech?
So with the biotech, our first indication to seek will definitely be for pain management as it relates to opiate abuse.
Yeah, very timely.
Yeah, I mean, given the fact of the state of affairs with respect to the opiate epidemic, and how, there's been more deaths caused by the opiate epidemic
Yep.
than there were in the Vietnam War, this is horrendous. And unfortunately, or fortunately for us, we're located in Pennsylvania. I do have an office in California in the Bay Area, but primarily our headquarters is located in Pennsylvania, the greater Philadelphia area. So Pennsylvania is one of the top states within the United States with the highest amount of opiate deaths, overdoses. So this is something that definitely needs to be fixed. And so we're hoping that medical cannabis may be a solution from a pain management standpoint. I think our secondary that we would be looking to seek would be PTSD and mental health, because they're also
Interesting.
unmet medical needs.
Yeah, I was just talking about my mom and depression, and
Yeah.
her doctor. I was surprised her doctor. I guess he's pretty progressive. He recommended we try CBD, so that's next on the agenda. That's what got my antenna interested in CBD. And so then I found you guys on Instagram. I was like, hey, you guys are actually doing research studies on CBD, and you're a biotech. I need to connect ASAP. And I know you guys got to go, but I know Christina has to go right now. But because there's obviously a stigma associated with anything that's medical marijuana, especially in this industry. I mean, how do you get around that? I see you guys on Instagram, I see you on Twitter, but how are you working on building your brand?
Okay.
Because you're basically one of a handful of pioneers in this space.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And that's definitely how we're viewing ourselves in this space. I mean, I feel like because, we've worked on the traditional side, meaning, the traditional biotech side and pharma side for, the majority of our careers. And, my key personnel, as far as my main team, as far as like the heads of the departments, there's 4 of them, including myself. We've had 28 FDA drug approvals we've worked on, and then 2 devices. So that's a pretty large amount of our career working on drugs that got approvals. So I think we have come into this industry, and what I mean by that is the medical cannabis industry, in an informed manner, because we've been doing this for so long. We want to make sure that we carry forward the same type of rigor, if you will, as it relates to clinical research, and making sure there are no claims made that are unfounded. Like I'm sure you saw in the news, there were 3 or 4 back in the fall CBD companies that got 483s from Gottlieb. You can't get mad at him, because he's just following process and procedures. People cannot make claims without clinical trials. You can't say these things work when they don't. You don't know. Do
you think there's a gold mine out there? I mean, obviously you guys are doing it. You wouldn't be investing all the time and resources into clinical research if you didn't think there was opportunity there. Do you really think that there is an opportunity there, or with it being legalized already, is it not as much as a traditional medication would provide it, as far as opportunities from an ROI perspective for a sponsor?
I definitely think there are opportunities. I think that given, just picking on opiates right now, and the masses of pills that people were taking because they were prescribed by their doctors, and then got hooked on it, and then, what happens then? We fall into the spiral of going on the corner to spending $80 for a pill, or whatever. I'm reading reports on this. I don't know. I'm not an opiate user, so I can't say for sure. But
thank God you're not.
Yeah, no, definitely not. But I've had people around me that had been hooked on opiates, so I've seen it firsthand. And some of my team members have had. One of the guys that's helping us, his mom died from an opiate overdose, and she was 40. And that's, this was some years ago, right? But still, that's a pretty hard. I mean, the kid was 17, and now he's probably like 26. So it wasn't that long ago for him that his mom passed away. So I definitely think that, it is. I mean, it's absolutely tragic. And I think that there's definitely an ROI for many different therapeutic areas. And there may be an opportunity, like let's just talk about cancer from a supportive care standpoint. I mean, these poor cancer patients, they get hooked on opiates from pain, and then now they're hooked on opiates. Everything's falling apart. They have cancer. I mean, it's a big mess for them. And there's really nothing out there from a palliative care standpoint for them. So medical cannabis could definitely be that leader, if you will. But again, you have to study it. You can't just say, this is going to work for them. We don't know. So it has to be researched.
Makes a lot of sense to me. I had a lot of misconceptions even prior to this interview. I was thinking, my biggest one is, why would any biotech invest in this when I can go across the street literally right now and get CBD? I don't need to see it go through trials. But what you're saying is there is an ROI there. once we get it on the formularies for hospitals, just like any other drug, right? Just
Right.
having sales reps go visit doctors. So very interesting. We're definitely gonna have you on again,
Thank you.
Christina. I know there's you guys have some pretty cool things coming up, and we can't talk
Yeah.
about yet, but we will bring you
Yeah.
on again. This was a very informative podcast, and it would be a disservice to my research clinics. I own a bunch of research sites, by the way,
Okay.
and my clients who own a bunch of research clinics, if I don't have the perfect opportunity right now live, and I get to put you on the spot, you can say no, of course. Can we get a feasibility questionnaire for a study?
Yeah, when we have, first off, I need to find out what your clinics, what is the therapeutic areas that they
Mm-hmm.
work in,
Mm-hmm.
because you know how it works from a feasibility standpoint.
Yep.
So I need to understand what you guys are working on, what is your competencies, and when we have an opportunity, for sure, I would be more than happy to send you all a feasibility questionnaire.
Thank you. Yeah, I would do the study at one of my sites just to be involved with this because I'm curious to see. I'm curious. I'm actually curious about the science behind it. So
Well,
I
and
had
this is
to.
history. This is history in the making.
Yeah, it
It,
is.
it really is.
Mm-hmm.
Not to sound dramatic, these are the things I have to remind myself. And it's kind of interesting to see. Like I've had paparazzi at my office a couple of times. I'm like, what are
Wow.
the at first I didn't know what they were, right? Because my office is in a historic area, and now I
Mm-hmm.
moved my
Mm-hmm.
office.
Mm-hmm.
Not because of that, just because I found a different office space that I really, really liked, and my lease was up. And so I was coming out of my office one day, and there was a photographer there, and I thought he was here to take pictures of the movie theater that was next door to us. That's like very historic and beautiful.
Yeah.
And then he said my name, and I'm like, what? And I turned around, he got me. I was like, oh.
Wow.
And I'm still waiting for the picture to surface. I don't know where it is. And then, and then the next day, because I'm a regular person, when I'm working and I don't have to meet with clients, I wear regular, regular clothes. Like
Yeah.
I'm not suited up. And the next time he got me, I had I'm a Yankees fan, so I have like a Yankees beanie on and stuff, and my Huarache sneakers. I'm like, what the hell?
Those are great sneakers, by the way. I love those.
Those are so comfortable, I tell you. So so that's happening a lot, pretty frequently. I don't think they can find me right now because the building I'm in, they're doing construction also. So
Yeah.
you can't get in the building unless they know who you are. So I'm very fortunate. Like even when I order lunch, I have to let the pit boss know, the construction crew, that I've ordered lunch.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
I've been safe so far.
I think all these new technologies, and I include CBD into this. I include personalized medicine. I include stem cell research into this. They're all made possible and brought to our attention because of the internet and because of social media, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, look at other industries. Like you're seeing what cryptocurrency is doing as far as disrupting the traditional financial and banking system. And this is kind of
Right.
similar to disrupting the traditional pharma space. And
Right.
I'm sure if you look at other industries, you'll find similar things. So yes, times are changing. And I do think this is going to be something of interest for most people, increasingly so, over the next decade. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But I have a personal interest in CBD and in stem cell research, and of course personalized medicine. But yeah, exciting times coming up, Christina, hopefully.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And I think it's really important. If I could say one last thing, it's really important for people to get as much education as possible. One of the things that I'm sure you see, Dan, is that we try to do a lot of like educational events specific, to medical cannabis. And
Christina, if you guys started a podcast, you would kill it.
yeah, you know what? I've been thinking about this.
We gotta talk. I got a digital agency too. We'll do something.
Well, One of my business development guys is actually he he's air staff for a local radio station here in Philadelphia. So he has all the equipment.
There you go. You have everything. You have everything built
Yeah.
in. You don't need much. You just need this thing. I don't know if you could see me, but
Yeah.
you just need like this boom stand. This Yeti
Yeah.
mic is like $150. There's cheaper ones. There's a webcam. That way you can record a podcast, film it. Now you just put it on YouTube also in addition to Facebook and then iTunes, Google Play, all that stuff. I mean, you want to get
Yeah.
reach, you want to get eyeballs, especially with your patient advocacy. You can go B2C as well as B2B. Yeah, you guys would kill it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that recommendation, and I'm glad that you also endorse the whole educational aspect because it's really important. There's a lot of misconceptions out there.
There's
There's
so much. The middleman's going away. I just had a call, and I know you got to go, but I just had a call with a potential client. There's someone that wants to start a research clinic. That's like our main bread and butter outside of running research clinics is helping people set up their own research clinics. And they were saying that my information is the only thing out there on YouTube, and all these other middlemen that have been thriving in this industry and preying on naive people are extorting them of their profits. Like we're talking about brokers that charge study brokers that take 60% of the gross revenue just because they put up a bunch of smoke and mirrors and confuse the hell out of somebody who doesn't know what they're doing when they first get started. And they don't care if they go out of business because they're going to make money off of them on their first couple studies they get. So
right.
all that's going away. The middleman's going away. You can go direct to your audience with social media, just like we're doing right now. And that's just going to continue to become more and more important in every business.
I agree, and as a CEO of multiple affinity companies, it's important for me to be able to talk to people like this today, to talk to yourselves and your listeners, so that they know that I'm fully committed in what I'm doing. And obviously, we need to make money so we can afford to do what we're doing, but that's one of the things that I'm consistently getting back from a feedback standpoint is that potential clients that want to work with my CRO or, people in general, like patients, medical cannabis patients that need help that just call my office directly now, they get me a lot of the times and they're surprised. They're like, oh, Christina, I'm fully committed in this. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing is to help people and make a difference in someone's life and, hopefully build a legacy for, my son as he grows older that, his mom did all these amazing things for people because that's at the end of the day why I'm here.
Yeah, I don't know you. This is the first time we spoke, and we'll get to know each other over the next couple of interviews, but we need more real people, real average Joes in this industry because for the longest time these pharma companies have been run by anything but real people, right? And so
I agree.
This is a new era for hopefully for medicine, and you're one of the pioneers. So thank you very much, Christina. I know you gotta go.
Thank you.
I know you gotta go, but this will be up on YouTube and iTunes later today.
Okay,
and
thank you.
We'll get you on again. Okay.
Awesome. I appreciate it. You have a great rest of your day, Dan.
You
I appreciate
too. Thank you very much, and we'll all talk to you all later. Bye bye.
Okay.